You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of Superman, doing the indie films this week. One of the biggest films of the year on a lot of levels, mainly because the director James Gunn and the director Zack Snyder have this. They're friends in real life, but their fan bases toxically attack each other. In this context is that the Zack Snyder DC films, which began with Man of Steel, which was a damp squib on release. It did alright at the box office, but it got a fair amount of critical, mainly because Zack Snyder's writing gave us Henry Cavill as the perfect Superman, but didn't give us any Clark Kent. And the biggest irony here is James Gunn has just given us Clark Kent and not given us Superman. So his failure over those DC films and his rabid fan base came up with this whole sort of toxic thing, because Batman vs Superman was dreadful, and then we had the ancillary films such as the original Justice League, which was abysmal, the original Suicide Squad, which was abysmal, and then he came back for a triumphant last lap with the Snyder Cut of Justice League, which I actually gave an outstanding review to. I thought it was an amazing film. One of the best this century, and the only outstanding film alongside Watchmen that the usually terrible Zack Snyder has made, because he followed that up with Rebel Moon Part 1 and 2, which were dismal. But Zack Snyder's Justice League was his best outing in the DC cloak. But Man of Steel, compared to what followed, actually shines a lot brighter now. And the story and the characters in it were a lot better. It was just this very dour version of Superman that had no personality, that was emo, that really was rubbish, and wasting the talents of Henry Cavill, who is hopefully going to triumphantly come back with Russell Crowe in Highlander, which I'm very excited about. And the idea is that Zack Snyder is a terrible writer and a visual artist. He's actually the successor to Michael Bay, which they won't like to hear. And James Gunn is the writer who makes much better films, but I don't think that's strictly true. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy was certainly fantastic. 2 was not. It was a pretty dire film, and the Suicide Squad. I think that was that the first one or the recent one? The recent one was much better. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is probably the only great post-Endgame MCU film. So now he's swapped over to relaunch Superman, and it's caused all manner of trouble online, with Zack Snyder's fan base just gunning for everything. Particularly David Corran Sweat as a replacement for their idol Henry Cavill. And a lot of the pre-feature stills and footage looking incredibly goofy. Well, there's one thing I will say. All that goofy stuff that was shown in the stills and in the clips that were shown online and got a lot of abuse, that's the film. It really is like that all the way through. It does not look good. And the story itself is very lackluster. So we get a much more Clark Kent-y Superman this time around, with a lot more human stuff going on. With the actress... Who's the actress? Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, who's a lot better fit than Amy Adams was as Lois Lane. She was completely unused, I felt. She's a much better Lois Lane, and their chemistry back and forth is a lot better, as closer to the original Christopher Reeves, Margaret Kidder sort of Superman, Lois Lane vibe, but it certainly isn't enough to sustain this film. The story is going back to Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult here, and I thought the story was rubbish. So it felt more like watching a lower tier post-Endgame MCU film, because it's got all this stuff about pocket universes and stuff and multiple superheroes, which just felt like watching a mid-tier Marvel film, not watching a superhero film. So Superman is basically trying to stop a war in a made-up country. He stops this war, and Lex Luthor convinced the American government that he's too powerful to be allowed to do these things without going through the proper channels in an effort to delegitimize and eventually kill Superman. And Nicholas Hoult, for some reason, has developed a pocket universe where he keeps all of these people captive who are his enemies, as I'm sure Mr. Trump would love to do. And he eventually manages to get Superman imprisoned in this world. It's such a weak story, and it's like this whole notion of the universe splitting is just garbage. I think they did a similar thing in the Marvels movie. It's just not a solid foundation for the film. We get some extra characters in the term of, there's a Green Lantern character, there's Hawk Girl, and a few other superheroes that are metahumans that assist Superman or work alongside Superman in these fighting off monsters. And some of it, like the big monster attack on the city, looks really good, but a lot of it looks terrible. And I don't know why they made it look like it does. Because when he's flying along and looking into the camera, it looks awful. And I felt the whole Pocket Universe stuff with like this river of the universe splitting going along actually looked really bad. I thought it was a very enjoyable film on many levels, but then it was trite on many others. And I thought that, the only people that stood out in it for me was the 10-second performance of Supergirl at the end, the dog, who was fantastic, and the star of the show was Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I thought he was fantastic, even though the story didn't make any sense at all, and was just like, really? That's the best you could come up with? He was great as Lex Luthor. I thought he really did stand out. I thought Corin Sweat and Brosnahan were quite good when they were speaking one-on-one, but then they make her fly around in spaceships. So this whole notion that this is going to be a more humane, written, acted film, when the last third, at least 45 minutes, is just CGI pile-up, and it doesn't look good either. So I did think this was an enjoyable film, but it's so lightweight that this is supposed to launch the new DC universe. This is phase 1. Nothing here, everything here is so lightweight, including the characters and the story, that I've got no interest in going back to it. So I don't know how that's going to launch a universe. I didn't want to hang around with the side crew. I didn't particularly rate Superman. I do think Man of Steel was a better film, flaws and all. When you look at stuff like Russell Crowe as the dad and his whole storyline and everything compared to the parents in this one, it was a better film. It was just a really dour, overly boring at times film, but at least it had a storyline that actually made sense and actually had some power to it, and the side characters had a bit more power to them with Zod and so on. Whereas here there's really nothing going on. It's almost like TV standard, and the goofiness is off the charts. Love the dog, love Lex. Even though she was there for 10 seconds, I did love Supergirl. I didn't really rate anything else that happened in this film at all. But it is enjoyable. It's just you'll get to the end and not ever think about it again. So I'm going to give the new Superman film a 6 out of 10.